Section 21D. What the Buddha taught in the world today, continued and end. The Buddha's message. The world today lives in constant fear, suspicion, and tension. Science has produced weapons which are capable of unimaginable destruction. Brandishing these new instruments of death, great powers threaten and challenge one another, boasting shamelessly that one could cause more destruction and misery in the world than the other. They have gone along this path of madness to such a point that now if they take one more step forward in that direction, the result will be nothing but mutual annihilation, along with the total destruction of humanity. Human beings, in fear of the situation they have themselves created, want to find a way out and seek some kind of solution. But there is none except that held out by the Buddha. His message of nonviolence and peace, of love and compassion, of tolerance and understanding, of truth and wisdom, of respect and regard for all life, and of freedom from selfishness, hatred, and violence. The Buddha says, never by hatred is hatred appeased, but it is appeased by kindness. This is an eternal truth. One should win anger through kindness, wickedness through goodness, selfishness through charity, and falsehood through truthfulness. There can be no peace or happiness for man as long as he desires and thirsts after conquering and subjugating his neighbors. As the Buddha says, the victor breeds hatred and the defeated lies down in misery. He who renounces both victory and defeat is happy and peaceful. The only conquest that brings peace and happiness is self-conquest. One may conquer millions in battle, but he who conquers himself, only one, is the greatest of conquerors. You will say that this is all very beautiful, noble, and sublime, but impractical. It is practical to hate one another, to kill one another, to live in eternal fear and suspicion like wild animals in a jungle. Is this more practical and comfortable? Was hatred ever appeased by hatred? Was evil ever won over by evil? But there are examples, at least in individual cases, where hatred is appeased by love and kindness, and evil won over by goodness. You will say that this may be true, practicable in individual cases, but that never works in national and international affairs. People are hypnotized, psychologically puzzled, blinded, and deceived by the political and propaganda usage of such terms as national, international, or state. What is a nation but a vast conglomeration of individuals? A nation or a state does not act. It is the individual who acts. What the individual thinks and does is what the nation or the state thinks and does. What is applicable to the individual is applicable to the nation or the state. If hatred can be appeased by love and kindness on the individual scale, surely it can be realized on the national and international scale too. Even in the case of a single person, to meet hatred with kindness, one must be tremendous courage, boldness, faith, and confidence in moral force. May it not be even more so with regard to international affairs? If by the expression not practical you mean not easy, you are right. Definitely, it is not easy, yet it should be tried. You may say it is risky trying it. Surely it cannot be more risky than trying a nuclear war. It is a consolation and inspiration to think today that at least there was one great ruler, well known in history, who had the courage, the confidence, and the vision to apply this teaching of nonviolence, peace, and love to the administration of a vast empire in both international and external affairs. Asoka, the great Buddhist emperor of India, 3rd century BC, the beloved of the gods, as he was called. At first, he followed the example of his father and grandfather and wished to complete the conquest of the Indian peninsula. He invaded and conquered Kalinga and annexed it. Many hundreds of thousands were killed, wounded, tortured, and taken prisoner in this war. But later, when he became a Buddhist, he was completely changed and transformed by the Buddhist teachings. In one of his famous edicts, inscribed on rock Edict 13, as it is now called, the original of which one may read even today, referring to the conquest of Kalinga, the emperor publicly expressed his repentance and said how extremely painful it was for him to think of that carnage. He publicly declared that he would never draw his sword again for any conquest, but that he wishes all living beings nonviolence, self-control, the practice of serenity, and mildness. This, of course, is considered the chief conquest by the beloved of the gods, that is Asoka, namely the conquest by piety. Not only did he renounce war himself, he expressed his desire that my sons and grandsons will not think of a new conquest as worth achieving. Let them think of that conquest only which is the conquest by piety, that is good for this world and the world beyond. This is the only example in the history of mankind of a victorious conqueror at the zenith of his power, still possessing the strength to continue his territorial conquest, yet renouncing war and violence and turning to peace and nonviolence. Here's a lesson for the world today. The ruler of an empire publicly turned his back on war and violence and embraced the message of peace and nonviolence. There is no historical evidence to show that any neighboring king took advantage of Asoka's piety to attack him militarily, or that there was any revolt or rebellion within his empire during his lifetime. On the contrary, there was peace throughout the land, and even countries outside his empire seem to have accepted his benign leadership. To talk of maintaining peace through the balance of power, or through the threat of nuclear deterrence, is foolish. The might of armaments can only produce fear and not peace. It is impossible that there can be genuine and lasting peace through fear. Through fear can come only hatred, ill will, and hostility, suppressed perhaps for the time being only, but ready to erupt and become violent at any moment. True and genuine peace can prevail only in an atmosphere of metta, amity, free from fear, suspicion, and danger. The aim of Buddhism. Buddhism aims at creating a society where the renewous struggle for power is renounced, where calm and peace prevail away from conquest and defeat, where the persecution of the innocent is vehemently denounced, where one who conquers oneself is more respected than those who conquer millions by military and economic warfare, where hatred is conquered by kindness and evil by goodness, where enmity, jealousy, ill will, and greed do not infect men's minds, where compassion is the driving force of action, where all, including the least of living things, are treated with fairness, consideration, and love, where life, peace, and harmony in a world of material contentment is directed towards the highest and noblest aim, the realization of the ultimate truth, nirvana.